Thanks, Martin. So I was watching Gilman backstage, and it was pretty heavy, and I feel like I should start this meeting by introducing myself. So my name is Mike S., and I'm a gamer. I want to talk to you today about Major League Gaming and eSports. We started Major League Gaming over a decade ago, and we've been doing this for a long time. Things have changed certainly a lot in the industry, but they've also changed with our consumer base. Just a quick show of hands. Has anyone ever been to an MLG event out there in the audience? Okay, a couple, not many. Has anyone ever seen one of our major broadcasts or any big eSports broadcasts? So a few more, but still not a lot. So we've been doing this for a little over a decade, and what we do as the largest eSports organization in North America and one of the biggest in the world is we run big live events, big competitions with pro gamers battling it out with each other, and also online with pros and amateurs who are trying to get into the pro ranks and compete. Since a lot of you haven't seen it, though, and since we're only me and one speaker away from cocktails, let me show you a more interesting thing than me talking, which is one of just a video clip, a couple minutes long, of one of our big competitions. Can you guys roll the video?
Bolt taken as the spring championship.
Bolt storms the front, the natural falls, the third base is going down. The Marauder drops continue to rip it down.
GG! Bolt is your MLG spring champion for StarCraft 2.
3 days, 128 players. Bolt proving that with university and dedicated practice, he can still be a champion. Hyun pushed him to the limit, but it wasn't enough, ladies and gentlemen. Second place goes to Quantic Hyun, but the champion of MLG 2013 Spring is CM Storm Bolt!
Bolt also joins the likes of MMA, MVP, and Life, who have all earned themselves a triple crown, winning an event in Europe, an event in North America, an event in Korea. And now that list grows by one more. Bolt!
3 days of intense matches have led to this point. They are now 2 kills away from becoming the champions.
And they are going to move in here. They've got A set up. Karma takes out Clayster. They're trying to get in here. X pops out. They're hopefully going to get this bomb down, and they do get it down. A 3v2 situation. They are set up in A. This is going to be difficult for Impact to try to get in here, knock all these guys out, and get it a fuse. Time is dwindling down on the clock. Impact's fate lies on the line here as Complexity's trying to be crowned your Anaheim champions. It can happen here in 23 seconds.
Crim6 and Aches have the front unlocked. TP watching the flank. One kill away now, and Crim is gonna do it!
That is it! Complexity takes out Impact!
Ladies and gentlemen, your MLG Spring Champions for Call of Duty Black Ops 2, Complexity!
So I'm sure most of you guys, too, at home, when you're on your Xbox playing Call of Duty, if you actually win a game, do the jersey rip, too, right? Kind of what I'm here to talk about is how does people watching other people play video games turn into a spectator sport? And we've been at it for a long time. Like Martin said, a lot of people in this industry said to us 10 years ago when we were able to get a meeting, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. No one's going to sit around and watch other people play video games. It doesn't make any sense. And, we heard that from a lot of different people in the kind of traditional guard world. And the reality is, now it's a little vindicating because it is so big. And the reality is what makes a spectator sport is not the people in the industry that are producing it, but it's the audience. And the audience for what we're doing and others are doing globally in the esports business is growing like crazy. And it's very highly engaged. And that's what we'll be talking about a little bit today. So what you just saw and what you just heard, hopefully the cadence in the broadcaster's voice, the graphics packages wrapping around the screen, it kind of sounds a little bit like sports. It sounds like you're watching ESPN. I can tell you if you're sitting in the room, the electricity of 5,000 or 10,000 people watching one of these matches happening live, it feels like to me, you're sitting in Madison Square Garden and watching the Knicks win for once. It's really exciting. We're doing that by design, though. We're doing that to evoke in the viewership, hey, I might be watching Call of Duty or I might be watching Dota 2, but really this is a sport because these are the best players in the world doing this, head-to-head, going against each other. And when I'm listening to what the broadcaster's saying, it sounds like Monday Night Football. When I'm watching the graphics package, it looks like SportsCenter. That's the important thing, and that's kind of how we're turning just people playing video games into a real spectator sport. We're also not encumbered by traditional distribution challenges, meaning we don't have to wait around to get big enough to get a TV deal for anyone to see this. This is a digital sport. It happens in a digital virtual environment, and we broadcast it digitally. One of the things we did recently, which I'll talk a little bit more about, is we've actually created our own live streaming platform. Having used just about every other platform that exists in the world for the past 10 years, we finally built our own. And interesting, when I talk to people now, and I actually got this a few times today, they say, hey, if this eSports thing is so big, if MLG is growing so fast, when are we going to see it on television? Like, when's it going to actually make it to television? And the really funny thing to me is I did a TV deal with NBC Sports in 2006. We did a whole season on USA Network of MLG's Pro Circuit. And nobody really knows about it. Don't feel bad, because most of our fans don't realize that either. And that's because this is not a TV sport. It's much bigger. When we go live with a broadcast, that one that you were just watching was our spring championship last year in Anaheim. Over 4 million people from 175 countries tuned in to watch some of that. That's already pretty big. We couldn't really do anything near that on USA Network a few years ago. So it's interesting because the traditional sort of metrics for intuitively what you think creates a spectator sport don't really apply to us. Everything's digital. The audience is digital. Our young, primarily male audience is used to consuming video, especially live video, online, because they don't really have cable TV at home. And if they're watching the Super Bowl, it's probably through a pirated stream on their laptop or their Xbox anyway. So we're mapping to that audience, and we're doing things differently. When Martin said earlier that he didn't really believe in esports getting big, like I said, we got a lot of resistance from the industry at the beginning. But the people who didn't really have any resistance, who kind of understood what we were trying to do, were people from the traditional television sports industries and the leagues. League execs, TV execs. And in fact, our first guy on our board of advisors was a guy named Neil Pilson, who was the president of CBS Sports for almost 20 years. And Neil had already been retired for several years when he started working with us. And I said, Neil, we've got guys playing video games on teams on a big stage, and we're broadcasting it, and people are excited about it. What do you think about video games? What do you know about video games? And he said, I've never played a video game. One time I saw my granddaughters playing that Nintendo thing on their TV. But tell me about what you're doing. And I said, we've got 2 teams of 4 at the time we were playing Halo on the league. And he said, I've got 2 teams of 4 young guys who are really competitive, the best skilled at this in the world. And they're playing against each other. And he said, do they have personalities? And I said, yeah. And he said, are they competitive and fired up? And I said, yes. And he said, is there a storyline that you can tell? Does some of them win or lose? Is there a Yankees and a Red Sox? And I said, absolutely. And he said, I don't really care about video games. That's what I care about. And that's what makes it a spectator sport. So if you can get people to care about those personalities, follow the storyline, it doesn't matter what the playing field is. It could be 100 yards on a green field, or it could be Call of Duty Ghosts. It doesn't really matter what the playing field is. We're creating a spectator sport by creating heroes and getting people to attach to personalities. And the heroes are the players and the teams, but they're also the games. And that's what's kind of helping us get just a bunch of people playing video games and watching each other play video games into a real spectator sport. So what makes all this compelling? Personality is really important, as I just touched on. What you're seeing here is a shot from the broadcast booth, a skill shot, of that actual broadcast that we just saw the video of. The guy on the left there is Chris Puckett, who's our main broadcaster for first-person shooters. And the guy on the right is a former player and coach, who's another commentator. And the guy in the middle is a big Call of Duty fan and a big Call of Duty player and a big MLG fan, but he happens to be Dwight Howard from the Houston Rockets. And just like a little quick story about why personality is important. Dwight is actually a huge Call of Duty player, and he's been a big MLG fan for a while. He's obviously a very competitive guy. That weekend was also the same weekend that he became an unrestricted free agent. So about 36 hours after that photo was taken, he became unrestricted in the league. It was probably the most important weekend of his career, outside of if he makes it into a championship. So the really interesting thing that happened for me, though, was the press picked it up. ESPN.com was there, and Yahoo Sports picked it up. And what they were talking about when they were writing about Dwight being at what they called a gaming convention in Anaheim, during the most important weekend of his career was they weren't writing about, is Dwight a good passer? What's his shooting percentage from the free throw line? They weren't talking about the sport at all. What they were talking about is, why is this guy who's a superstar in the LA market, everybody in LA wants to keep him, they're looking at him as the great post-Kobe hope. How are we going to keep this guy in LA? In the meantime, some of the reporters also found out we have a guy on our board at MLG named Daryl Morey, who's also the GM of the Houston Rockets. And Daryl was in the LA market too, waiting to be able to meet with Dwight to talk about bringing him over to the Rockets. What the entire ESPN and Yahoo Sports guys wrote about was the story of Dwight the personality and what's going through his head, that he can't, the most important weekend of his career, and he's at some video game convention talking about Call of Duty and going on a broadcast with a bunch of kids playing Call of Duty. And meanwhile, Daryl Morey, who's on the board of this company, can't come anywhere near the convention center because it'd be a violation of NBA rules. And all this stuff is going on, and they're talking about the kind of guy Daryl is and the kind of guy Dwight is. Nothing about how good the teams are or any of the technical or fundamentals that have to do with basketball. It was all about personality, and that's the kind of thing that we're doing with MLG, and that's what's happening with esports globally. The teams have personalities, the players have personalities. You saw those guys raising the statue over their heads on the main stage and doing the fake jersey tear-off when they win the game. They're passionate, they have great personalities, and that's what we play off of. The other thing is predictability. So there's a reason that leagues have schedules and broadcast schedules, and I know that 16 weeks a year on Monday night, I can turn on ESPN and watch one of the best football games of the week. We're doing the same thing with our league. So we're not only doing these big live events, but every day of the week, there's something scheduled happening that's an online game that we're broadcasting from our studio in New York City to a global audience. That kind of predictability builds spectator bases and it builds fans around a league, and that's what we're focused on. And then passion. Obviously, people are super passionate. I don't know if you saw the pictures from Seattle, but I don't think that many people live in Seattle, but they were all on the street to welcome Richard Sherman and the rest of the team home. That kind of passion exists in sports. It also exists in gaming. If you work in the gaming industry, that fans are vocal critics and supporters of developers. They're also the same for teams. And people are passionate about not just the games, but the players who play them and their favorite team in the same way that they're passionate about the Seahawks and the Broncos. And we build on that in order to create storylines and get people engaged around the games. The way that we know it's working is because it's growing like crazy. And back to my first point, it's not any of us sitting around this room who get to determine if this is a spectator sport or not. It's the people that tune in and watch. We've had, in the past 3 years, over 1,500% growth in viewership around our championship events. The other thing that's really interesting is it's not just that a lot of people are watching, or a lot more people than used to. It's also they're watching for a long time. So the average viewer session, when they do turn into our championship events, is 150 minutes. Again, kind of getting back to the TV thing, we can't really do that on TV. We do 3 12-hour days in a row. We can't broadcast that on ESPN. But it's great for a digital format. People want to watch it on their phones and their tablets, over their console or on their laptop. Last year, our viewers consumed 54 million hours of live video of our competition broadcasts, way up from where we were just a few years ago. And it's a big thing. The other thing that we know is they are engaged, and people tend to think of this kind of young, hyper-gamer audience as adverse to advertising and commercialization of gaming and of sport. The reality is our ad metrics are off the charts. So we run 30-second spots in between game breaks, just like when you're watching football or basketball. We'll take a 2 or 3 minute break, run a bunch of 30-second commercials. Every time we start a commercial, 90% of the time, the viewer watches it to completion. The internet as a whole with video advertising is just over 70%. We're over 90%. If you watch TV like I do, mostly on a DVR, I haven't seen a commercial in a really long time. Even when I watch live sports, I flip the channel during breaks. And I think that's the interesting thing about what's going to help make this sport a really successful spectator sport, commercially as well as just with a big audience. The other thing is, because it's digital and because the audience is who they are, it's inherently social. So our major broadcasts generated almost 1.5 billion social media impressions last year, because people are not just watching, but they're communicating with each other. And they're communicating over Twitter, and they're posting to Facebook. And we recently, when we launched MLG TV, we launched it with a chat client. Lots of people like to chat while they're watching this stuff. Our chat client's directly integrated with Twitter. So while you're chatting, you're also posting. And almost every time we light up a new broadcast, it starts to trend, at least in the US, on Twitter. This screenshot is one of the new shows that we just started to produce. Having our own platform, MLG TV, which we rolled out in November, allows us to control the product. So we're able to broadcast 1080p high definition to everyone in the world on a mobile device or on a computer screen. And we're starting to extend that out to consoles and over-the-top TV devices. Having that ownership allows us to invest more in the programming. And the way that we're helping to build the audience is by educating the audience about what it is that's happening in these games, telling the backstories in between matches and big competitions. And we're doing that with a show called eSports Report. That's Chris again and his co-host D.I.C.E, who are our kind of sports center of esports. That show's on every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern on MLG TV. And it's building a pretty good audience. And again, you can kind of see the, if you replace the Ghost icon with an NFL icon or a Broncos jersey, it would be a little bit more familiar. But that's kind of what we're emulating. This kind of show allows us to educate people who are not big esports fans about what's going on. I'm a Call of Duty player, but I like watching our Dota 2 stuff because I learned more about it watching this show and understanding the breakdowns of the big plays and who the teams are and why it's important to me. I may never be a Dota 2 player, but I have a particular team that I really like, and I like to follow them, and I like what their players are doing. Why the whole thing is important to us, why MLG TV was an important move for us to make, was gaining control of that distribution. We have already been producing content for over 10 years. Now we have our own distribution channel, and we can take it wherever we want, and we can monetize it effectively. I showed you how the ad performance does. We're starting to be able to reinvest in programming like this. And then adding that social layer to it creates real amplification. So we're really getting millions and millions of people to watch this stuff all the time, every time we broadcast one of the big events. Why do some games work for esports and some not? So these are kind of the big four of esports right now. We are really heavily focused this year on Call of Duty Ghosts and Dota 2, but we also do StarCraft and League of Legends a lot. You know, League of Legends has been in the news a lot. Riot's done just an absolutely amazing job of making a title that's really geared towards competition and using esports as a primary marketing channel to drive users into the game. With Call of Duty, we've been working with Activision for a couple of years. And a lot of what's happening is, it's sort of counterintuitive, I think, for developers. As a developer, you want to put out a game with a cool narrative that's going to engage people quickly. And the minute they start playing, the gameplay is a little addictive, and they want to keep going. What we're saying is esports requires a skill gap, meaning it should be kind of hard to play the game, and you got to practice to be good at it. It's counterintuitive for developers, but we found it actually works for casual players too, because as long as you're a casual player matched against another casual player, you tend to have a really good experience. And the more you play, the better you get at the game, and you recognize that skill increase over time. That's what's really, I think, driven a lot of Riot's success with League of Legends and for all these games. The other important thing is both companies really invested, especially Activision with Call of Duty and Riot with League of Legends, invested a lot in the spectator mode of those games. So allowing us as a broadcaster the capability to give an overall view of the game, to move that camera around inside the game, to follow different players, not just the viewpoints of the players, but follow what they're doing from a spectator mode is really important. And again, we're kind of out evangelizing this in the industry in general and saying esports and competitive gaming is an important part of the overall gaming ecosystem. It's a broadcast thing and a game mechanics thing, and we're trying to help with that effort. So for us, you know, this future of esports is kind of a when, not if question at this point. We're reaching a live global audience. We got them really heavily engaged. There's no barrier to us broadcasting live all the time because we have our own platform. And there's lots of other platforms like YouTube and Twitch that are out there for everybody to kind of use and build audience in. More and more developers and publishers are focusing on the esports audience as a critical part of their overall audience and how they engage players with their game. And we're continuing to help with that effort. But I think as an industry, what I'd like to leave all you with is a question. And I think you probably guessed what my answer to this would be. But I guess the question for the industry is, do you think esports can take its place among other spectator sports in the world? Thank you.